In the summer of 1940, somewhere in northern France, a German infantry officer crouched beside an abandoned British position and picked up a weapon his men had found lying in the mud. The British had retreated so fast they had left equipment scattered across the fields. Rifles, webbing, ammunition boxes, the detritus of an army running for its life. But this particular officer did not throw the weapon aside. He held it, turned it over, checked the mechanism. Then he fired a short burst into the tree line. He stood very still for a moment afterward. Then he sat down and wrote a field report. In it he described the weapon he was holding as, and I want to be precise here because this matters, the finest light machine gun he had ever encountered. He noted its accuracy. He noted its simplicity. He noted that even after being dragged through the mud of a French field and abandoned in the rain, it had fired perfectly on the first trigger pull. That weapon was the Bren gun. And here is the part that should make your jaw drop. The British Army had voted against adopting this exact weapon. Not once. 3 times. Over 8 years. The committees had read the test reports, watched it outperform every rival, and still found reasons to say no. The gun that a German officer described as the finest he had ever handled had come within a single bureaucratic vote of never reaching British hands at all. This is the story of a Czech engineer, a factory in a city most people cannot find on a map, and a weapon that the British military establishment tried their very best to reject, until the soldiers who actually carried it into battle refused to let it be taken away from them. To understand what Václav Holek actually built and why it mattered, you first need to understand the problem that British infantry was facing in the 1930s, and the problem was serious. The standard light machine gun in British service during the late 1920s and early 30s was the Lewis gun. Named after an American colonel, improved and mass-produced during the First World War, the Lewis had been a genuine breakthrough in its day, and by the time the 1930s arrived, it was old. Not just old in design, old in philosophy. The Lewis weighed 26 pounds with a fully loaded drum magazine. It had 97 separate component parts. It used a top-mounted circular pan magazine that sat high above the receiver and caught on every branch, every piece of vegetation, every doorframe a soldier tried to pass through. In desert conditions, the mechanism jammed. In Arctic cold, the oil seized. In sustained fire, the cooling fins on the barrel glowed red, and the whole thing had to stop or burn itself apart. Soldiers carried it because they had nothing else. They did not love it. Now look at what Germany was developing. The MG-34, Maschinengewehr 34, began appearing in the mid-1930s, belt-fed, 1,200 rounds per minute in sustained anti-aircraft fire. It could be mounted on a bipod for infantry use, on a tripod for sustained fire, on a vehicle mount, or on an anti-aircraft ring. It was one of the most versatile automatic weapons ever designed. British Army observers who watched it at demonstrations came back with reports that made senior officers uncomfortable. Germany's average infantry squad could lay down more fire for longer with more precision than anything the British Army could field. Britain needed a new light machine gun, urgently, and the answer, it turned out, was already sitting in a small arms factory in Brno, Czechoslovakia. They just refused to look at it. His name was Václav Holek. He was born in 1886 in the city of Brno, in what was then the Austro-Hungarian Empire, in what is today the Czech Republic. His father was a craftsman who worked with metal and machinery, and Holek grew up surrounded by mechanical things, the kind of childhood where you learn what metal sounds like when it is right, and what it sounds like when something is wrong, because those sounds are the soundtrack of the household. He never earned a formal engineering degree. There was no prestigious institution, no letters after his name, no academic pedigree of the kind that impresses procurement committees. He had something rarer than any of those things. He had an instinct for how mechanical systems actually behave under real conditions, as opposed to how they behave in test reports written by men who have never fired a gun in mud. By his late 30s, Holek was working at the Zbrojovka Brno factory, the Czechoslovak state arms manufacturer located in the city that gave the factory its name. Zbrojovka translates roughly as arms works. The factory made weapons for the Czechoslovak military and for export, and it was serious, respected, technically capable. Holek rose within it because he was simply better at solving mechanical problems than almost anyone around him. Not louder, not more politically connected, just better. And in the mid-1920s, he turned his attention to a specific problem that nobody had solved to his satisfaction. He wanted to design a light machine gun that would work, not work in a controlled testing environment, work in actual combat, under actual conditions, in the hands of soldiers who are frightened and exhausted and operating in dust, sand, jungle, snow, or North African scrub, and needed the weapon to function regardless. The The design he eventually produced was designated the ZBVZ-26. ZB stood for Zbrojovka Brno. The V's was the Czech abbreviation for Vzor, meaning model, and the 26 was the year it was completed. The British first saw it in 1930. Here is where the story gets genuinely infuriating. The British Army held a series of comparative trials in 1930, testing the ZBVZ-26 against a range of competitors, including British-designed alternatives. The results were unambiguous. Holek's design outperformed the competition in accuracy, reliability, and ease of use. The test officers wrote reports saying so, clearly, in writing, and the procurement committee looked at those reports, noted that the weapon was of foreign origin, noted that British manufacturers were lobbying hard against awarding a contract to a Czechoslovak factory, and found a series of technical objections that required Holek to make modifications. He made the modifications, every single one. He came back, second trials. Again, his weapon outperformed the competition. Again, the committee found new objections. The magazine needed to be changed to accommodate standard British .303 caliber ammunition. The bipod needed adjustment. The weight distribution needed refinement. Each objection was specific enough to seem technical, but collectively they formed a pattern that had nothing to do with engineering. They were about protecting British manufacturers from a foreign competitor whose product was simply better than anything they could produce. Holek went back to Brno and redesigned again. A third time. 8 years of trials, 8 years of committees, 8 years of modifications, and through all of it, and I find this genuinely remarkable, his fundamental operating principle never changed, because he knew it was right. Let me explain what he had actually built, and why it was so far ahead of anything the competition could offer. The Bren, the name came later, from Brno and Enfield, the British factory where it would eventually be licensed for production, operated on a gas-piston system. When you fire a cartridge in any gun, a proportion of the expanding gas that propels the bullet down the barrel can be tapped off through a small hole and used to cycle the action. To eject the spent case, load the next round, and reset the firing pin. Almost every automatic weapon uses this principle in one form or another. What matters is how you implement it. Holek's gas system was self-regulating in a way that almost no competing design managed. Think of it like a relief valve on a boiler. Too much pressure in the system, and the valve opens slightly to let the excess bleed away. Too little, and it closes to conserve what remains. This meant that the Bren functioned reliably across a wildly different range of environmental conditions: desert heat that thinned the propellant gases, Arctic cold that thickened the lubricating oil, humid jungle conditions that corroded mechanisms overnight, without the shooter needing to make manual adjustments. A Lewis gun that had been sitting in a French field for 3 days in the rain needed to be stripped, cleaned, lubricated, and reassembled before it could be trusted. A Bren in the same condition could simply be picked up and fired. The magazine was another piece of genuine engineering insight. Holek designed a curved 30-round box magazine that sat above the receiver, not beside it, as on many contemporary designs. Above it. This seems like a minor detail. It is not. A top-mounted magazine means gravity assists the feed of rounds into the chamber. Side-mounted or bottom-mounted systems rely on springs alone, and springs under the stress of sustained fire in cold or heat, under the vibration of a weapon discharging several hundred times per minute, are exactly the kind of mechanical component that fails at the worst possible moment. The top-mounted curved magazine was slower to manufacture, and more awkward to carry than a straight box design. Holek designed it that way deliberately because he had decided that reliability in the field mattered more than convenience in the factory. And then there was the barrel system. This is the part that I think every infantryman who ever carried a Bren would name as the most important feature of the weapon. Any automatic weapon sustained in fire generates enormous heat. The barrel of a machine gun, cycling 500 rounds per minute, will reach temperatures that begin to affect accuracy, accelerate wear, and eventually risk a catastrophic mechanical failure. Every successful machine gun design addresses this somehow. The MG-34, the German answer, required a 2-man crew for barrel changes. 1 man holding the weapon, 1 man fitting thick padded gloves before touching the red-hot barrel, using a special tool, taking a minimum of 15 to 20 seconds to complete the operation. During those 15 to 20 seconds, the weapon is silent. In an infantry fight, 15 to 20 seconds of silence from your machine gun position can cost you the position. Holek designed the Bren barrel to be changed by a single man in under 15 seconds without tools and without protective gloves, using a quick-release catch at the front of the receiver. You push the catch, the barrel comes free, you slot in the spare, click it home, and fire. A trained Bren gunner could do it in 8 or 9 seconds. The barrel handle on the Bren was designed to be gripped safely, even when the barrel was hot enough to cause burns, a small steel loop set away from the actual barrel metal. This is the kind of detail that only a man who has actually thought about what it means to change a barrel under fire would include. A committee designing a weapon for a test report would never think to specify it. A craftsman who understood what soldiers actually needed had built it in from the beginning. The Bren fired at approximately 500 rounds per minute, about half the cyclic rate of the MG-34. This sounds like a disadvantage. In a head-to-head fire superiority contest, more rounds per minute should win, and in certain tactical situations that is exactly right. But for the kind of infantry fighting that British and Commonwealth soldiers actually did across North Africa, Italy, Burma and Northwest Europe, fighting over extended distances against targets requiring aimed fire rather than area suppression, the Bren's slower, more controllable rate of fire produced something that mattered more than raw volume. It produced accuracy. A trained Bren gunner, prone behind the bipod, could fire consistent 4-round bursts that struck a target at distances where an MG-34 was simply producing noise. German infantry who had been on the receiving end of Bren fire knew the difference immediately. The British Army adopted the Bren gun in 1938, after 8 years and 3 rounds of trials. The Procurement Committee's written justification for the delay cited manufacturing and calibre compatibility concerns. It said nothing about the lobbying from British arms manufacturers. It said nothing about the fact that the test officers had recommended adoption as early as 1931. Václav Holek was not present at the adoption ceremony. There was no ceremony. The British Army simply issued a contract, modified the design for their standard calibre ammunition, licensed production to the Royal Small Arms Factory in Enfield, and began manufacturing as fast as they could. They were already behind. By the time British soldiers were carrying Brens into France with the British Expeditionary Force in 1939, they had been carrying a weapon that was functionally obsolete, the Lewis gun, for 8 years longer than they needed to. That gap matters, not as a historical footnote, as dead men. Let me put you in the Western Desert, outside the town of El Alamein, in the autumn of 1942. You're a section commander with the 51st Highland Division. Your platoon has been in a forward position for 6 hours. The temperature has been 110 degrees in the day, and has dropped 40 degrees since sunset. Sand is in everything. In the breech of your rifle, in your food, in the skin around your eyes. Your 2 riflemen have been cleaning their weapons for the last hour, field stripping in the dark by touch, trying to clear mechanisms gummed with grit. Your Bren gunner has not stopped firing. He fires 4-round bursts across the ridgeline every 3 minutes, adjusting slightly each time, keeping the Germans on the other side of that ridge from feeling comfortable enough to probe your position. His gun has been running since 2 in the afternoon. He has changed the barrel twice. Total time spent not firing, about 20 seconds across 6 hours. When a German patrol appears on your left flank at 2 in the morning, not a full attack, a probe, 3 men moving low and fast, he swings the bipod 12 inches left, puts 6 rounds across that approach in 2 bursts, and the patrol stops. No return fire, they fall back. He adjusts back to the ridgeline and continues. That sequence happened in one form or another at dozens of positions across North Africa, Italy, Northwest Europe and the Pacific. The data we have from soldiers who were there is extraordinarily consistent. They trusted the Bren in a way they trusted no other weapon they carried. German after-action reports from North Africa specifically noted the accuracy and sustained capability of British infantry fire as a factor they had not anticipated at the beginning of the campaign. Consider what the competition was offering them by comparison. The Lewis gun that the Bren replaced weighed more, had 3 times as many parts, jammed in the conditions they were actually fighting in, and could not be effectively stripped and reassembled in the field without a cleaning kit and a degree of mechanical knowledge that most infantrymen simply did not have. The American BAR, Browning automatic rifle, that equip American infantry squads through much of the war weighed almost as much as the Bren, held only 20 rounds in its magazine, and could not sustain automatic fire for more than short bursts without risking the mechanism. British soldiers who had occasion to compare the two came back with a consistent verdict. The Bren was better. German soldiers who encountered captured Brens during the campaign in France in 1940 did not leave them behind. They used them. The German officer who wrote that field report in the summer of 1940 was not being generous. He was being accurate. The Bren served the British Army and the armies of every Commonwealth nation that adopted it through every major conflict from 1938 to 1991. That is 53 years of active service. Korea in 1950, the Malayan Emergency, Suez in 1956, Cyprus, Aden, and then, in 1982, 44 years after its adoption, British soldiers carried the Bren to the Falkland Islands. 8,000 miles from the Czechoslovak factory where Václav Holek had first begun to think about what a reliable infantry machine gun should look like, and it performed exactly as it had always performed, reliably, without drama, without failure. In the 1950s, the British Army decided to standardise on NATO ammunition and converted the Bren to fire the 7.62mm round. The converted version was redesignated the L4. They did not redesign the operating mechanism. They did not redesign the barrel system or the bipod or the quick change catch. They kept Holek's design exactly as he had built it, changed only the caliber, and it worked perfectly with the new ammunition. That is not a coincidence. That is engineering so fundamentally correct that no subsequent improvement was necessary. Here is something that the official histories tend not to mention. In the autumn of 1940, the Luftwaffe conducted 3 deliberate bombing raids on the Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield, specifically the production buildings where Bren guns were being manufactured. This was not random targeting of industrial infrastructure. German intelligence had specifically identified the Bren as a critical problem for their infantry operations in France, and the targeting decision was made accordingly. The factory was damaged on each occasion. On each occasion, production resumed within days. The workers cleared the rubble, repaired the machinery and kept building. The Germans had tried harder to destroy the factory that made Holek's gun than the British War Office had tried to adopt the weapon in the first place. Václav Holek died in 1954. He was 67 years old. He had spent the last years of his working life in a Czechoslovakia that was now under Soviet influence, in a country that had been dismembered, occupied, liberated and reorganized, and that was not in any position to formally celebrate the contributions of a weapons designer to a Western military alliance it was officially opposed to. Britain sent no representative, no medal was awarded, no letter arrived from the Ministry of Defence thanking him for the weapon that its soldiers had carried for 16 years and counting. There was no ceremony. The soldiers who had carried his gun at Dunkirk, where many of them waded into the water with their Brens held above their heads, rather than abandon them on the beach, at El Alamein, where Bren teams held positions for hours in conditions that disabled every other weapon in the inventory, at Kohima, in the monsoon jungle, where the gun provided the firepower margin that stopped a Japanese advance that might otherwise have reached India. Those soldiers knew what the weapon had done. They had not been asked for their opinion in 1930. They were not asked in 1954 either. 3 times rejected, adopted against the resistance of an entire procurement system, carried further by more soldiers into more conflicts, over more decades than any other infantry weapon in British service. They said it was foreign. They were right. It was the best they ever had.